They spoke about my mother like she wasn't my whole world. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, cardigan wrapped tight around me like armor, and I didn't say a word. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I knew if I opened my mouth too soon, everything I'd been holding back would come out wrong. They had no idea what they were really asking. They had no idea who they were talking about, and they definitely had no idea what I was about to say. It started as a normal Sunday afternoon, family gathering, nothing special, just the usual faces around the dining table, my aunt, my uncle, my two cousins, and me. My mother was upstairs, resting. She'd been tired lately. More tired than usual. That's what happens when your body starts failing you, when age and illness catch up all at once. But to me, she was still the woman who raised me alone, who worked 2 jobs so I could go to college, who never once made me feel like I was too much. To them, though, sitting around that table with their coffee and opinions, she was becoming a problem, a burden, something they needed to figure out. My aunt started it. She always did. She had this way of talking that sounded concerned, but felt like judgment. "We need to talk about your mother," she said, looking at me with that tilted head, that soft voice people use when they want to seem caring, but really just want control. I nodded. I'd known this conversation was coming. I'd felt it building for weeks. The questions about her health, the comments about her memory, the suggestions, always framed as help, that maybe it was time to consider other options. I didn't respond right away. I just listened, because that's what I'd been doing my whole life. Listening, observing, waiting for the right moment. "She's getting worse," my uncle added, leaning back in his chair like he was delivering some kind of diagnosis. "Forgetful, confused. She asked me the same question 3 times last week." My cousin nodded in agreement. "And she can't live alone anymore. It's not safe." They weren't wrong about the facts. My mother was struggling. Her memory wasn't what it used to be. She needed help, but the way they talked about it, like she was a car that had stopped running, something to be dealt with and moved along, that's what made my chest tighten. I kept my face calm. I kept my hands still. I didn't let them see what I was feeling. Not yet. "We think it's time," my aunt said slowly, carefully, like she was explaining something to a child. "Time to look into a facility, somewhere with professionals, people who know how to handle this. Handle this. Like my mother was a situation, a case, not a person, not the woman who used to braid my hair before school, not the woman who sat with me in hospital waiting rooms when I was sick, not the woman who believed in me when no one else did." I felt the words rising in my throat, but I swallowed them down. I wasn't ready yet. I needed to hear more. I needed to know exactly how far they were willing to go. "It's not fair to you," my cousin said, looking at me with what she probably thought was sympathy. "You're young. You have your own life. You shouldn't have to put everything on hold to take care of her." And there it was, the thing they'd been dancing around. They weren't worried about my mother. They were worried about me having to be responsible. They were worried about inconvenience. I still didn't say anything. I just let them talk, let them dig deeper. My uncle mentioned costs. My aunt mentioned quality of life. My cousin mentioned how hard it must be for me. They all nodded at each other like they'd solved a problem, like they'd made a decision, like I wasn't even part of the equation. Then my aunt said the thing that almost broke me. She wouldn't even know the difference. She said it so casually, so matter-of-factly, like my mother's awareness was something measurable, something they could decide. She's already confused most of the time. A facility might actually be better for her. She'd have routines, structure, she'd be taken care of. Taken care of, as if I wasn't already doing that, as if the last 2 years of my life hadn't been doctor's appointments and medication schedules and middle-of-the-night phone calls when she couldn't sleep, as if love wasn't care. I looked down at my hands. My fingers were gripping the edge of my cardigan so tight my knuckles had turned white. I forced myself to relax them. Not yet. Not yet. The conversation continued. They started talking logistics, which facilities were nearby, how much it would cost, whether insurance would cover it. They talked about her like she was a budget line, an expense to be managed. And I sat there, my long black hair tied back tight, my face carefully neutral, and I let them finish. I let them say everything they needed to say, because I needed them to hear themselves. I needed them to understand exactly what they sounded like before I responded. My aunt looked expectantly. "So, what do you think?" she asked, as if my opinion had ever mattered to them, as if they'd already made their minds. I took a slow breath. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. I could feel the weight of everything I'd been holding pressing down on my chest. But my voice, when I finally spoke, was steady, calm, controlled. "I think you don't know her," I said quietly. The table went still. My aunt blinked. My uncle frowned. My cousin tilted her head like she'd misheard me. I kept going. "I think you see someone who's sick and struggling, and you've decided that means she's done, that she doesn't deserve to be home, that she's too much." My hands were steady now. My eyes met each of theirs, one by one. "But I don't think you actually know who you're talking about." "We're trying to help," my aunt said, her voice a little sharper now, a little defensive. I nodded. "I know, but help isn't deciding someone's life is over because it's inconvenient for you." The words landed heavy. My uncle shifted in his seat. My cousin looked away. I didn't stop. "You said she wouldn't know the difference, but she would. She knows her home. She knows her garden. She knows where her photos are, where she likes to sit in the morning, what side of the bed she sleeps on. She knows me." My voice cracked just slightly on that last word, but I steadied it. "And I know her. I know when she's scared. I know when she's confused. I know what makes her smile. Do you?" My aunt opened her mouth to respond, but I wasn't finished. "You come here once a month, maybe. You ask how she's doing, you drink her coffee, you eat at her table, and then you leave. You don't see her at 2 in the morning when she can't remember where she is, and I sit with her until she feels safe again. You don't see her on good days when she tells me stories about her childhood like they just happened yesterday. You don't see her cry because she knows she's forgetting things and she's terrified. You just see a problem, something to be fixed, someone to be moved." The room was silent now. Not the comfortable silence of family, the heavy, thick silence of people realizing they've said something they can't take back. My uncle cleared his throat. "We didn't mean it like that," he said quietly. I looked at him, really looked at him. "Then how did you mean it?" I asked. He didn't answer. Neither did anyone else. Because there was no good answer. There was no way to soften what they'd said. No way to make "she wouldn't even know the difference" sound like love. I leaned forward slightly, my hands flat on the table now. My mother worked her entire life. She raised me by herself. She sacrificed everything so I could have a future. And now that she needs me, you want me to put her somewhere and walk away? I shook my head slowly. That's not help, that's abandonment, and I won't do it. My aunt's face flushed. "You're being emotional," she said, like that was a criticism, like feeling something for my own mother was a weakness. I almost laughed. "Yes," I said simply, "I am, because she's my mother, and she deserves more than a decision made by people who see her twice a year." My cousin spoke up, her voice quieter now, less certain. "But what about you? What about your life?" I looked at her. She was younger than me. She didn't have kids, didn't have responsibilities beyond herself, and I realized she genuinely didn't understand. "This is my life," I said gently, "taking care of her, being there for her, making sure she feels loved and safe. That's not a sacrifice, that's a privilege. And one day when she's gone, I'll know I did everything I could. I'll know I didn't give up on her when things got hard. Can you say the same?" The question hung in the air. My cousin looked down, my uncle stared at his coffee, my aunt's jaw was tight, but she didn't respond. Because they couldn't, because deep down, they knew I was right. They knew they were asking me to do something they would never do themselves. They knew they were trying to make their own discomfort my problem, and now that I'd said it out loud, they couldn't pretend anymore. "I'm not putting her in a facility," I said, my voice firm now. "Final. She stays here, in her home with me, and if that's too much for you to understand, then you don't have to come around anymore." My aunt looked shocked. "You can't be serious," she said. I met her eyes. "I'm completely serious. You want to help? Actually help? Then show up, sit with her, talk to her, remind her she's not alone. But if you're just here to tell me she's a burden, then you can leave now." Nobody moved. My uncle looked uncomfortable, my cousin looked guilty, my aunt looked angry, but she didn't argue, because what could she say? I'd called them out. I'd said the thing they'd been avoiding. They didn't actually want to help. They wanted to feel better about not helping, and I wasn't going to give them that comfort. After a long moment, my aunt stood up. "I think we should go," she said stiffly. My uncle nodded and stood too. My cousin hesitated, then followed. They gathered their things in silence. No one said goodbye, no one apologized. They just left, and I sat there, alone at the table, feeling the weight of everything I just said settle over me like a blanket. My hands were shaking now, my breathing was uneven, but I'd done it. I'd stood up for her, I'd defended her, and I'd do it again. I heard footsteps on the stairs, slow, careful footsteps. My mother appeared in the doorway, her hair a little messy, her eyes tired but clear. "Did they leave?" she asked softly. I nodded. "Yeah, Mom, they left." She walked over and sat down next to me. For a moment, we just sat there in silence. Then she reached over and took my hand. Her skin was thin, fragile, but her grip was firm. "I heard some of it," she said quietly. I looked at her, surprised. "You did?" She nodded. "Enough." Her eyes met mine and they were wet with tears, but she was smiling. "Thank you," she whispered, "for fighting for me." I squeezed her hand. "Always," I said, and I meant it, because that's what love is. Not just the easy moments, not just the happy memories, but the hard days, the exhausting nights, the moments when everyone else walks away and you choose to stay. My mother leaned her head on my shoulder and I wrapped my arm around her. We sat like that for a long time, just breathing, just being together. And I realized something. They were wrong. She wasn't a burden. She was my mother, and I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The weeks after that were quieter. My aunt didn't call, my uncle didn't visit, my cousin sent one text, a half-hearted apology that didn't really apologize for anything. I didn't respond. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their understanding. I needed to take care of my mother, and that's exactly what I did. I hired a part-time nurse to help during the day when I was at work. I set up a better system for her medications. I made her favorite meals. I sat with her in the garden and listened to her stories, even the ones she'd told me 100 times before. Because every time she told them, she was sharing a part of herself, and I wanted every part I could get. One afternoon, she looked at me while we were sitting outside, the sun warm on our faces. "You gave up a lot for me," she said quietly. I shook my head. "I didn't give up anything, Mom." She smiled, but her eyes were sad. "Your friends, your social life, you could be out there living." I took her hand. "I am living, right here, with you. This is my life, and I don't regret a single second of it." She cried then, not sad tears, grateful ones, and I cried too, because I meant every word. They never spoke about my mother like that again, at least not to me, and if they did behind my back, I didn't care, because I knew the truth. I knew who she was, I knew what she meant to me, and I knew that when the time came, when she was gone and I had to face the world without her, I would have no regrets. I would know I showed up, I stayed, I loved her the way she deserved to be loved, not as a burden, but as my mother, my whole world, and that was enough.